Hi, I'm Bill Baker. I'm the General Manager of Business Intelligence Applications at Microsoft. I'm here to talk about the complete and integrated BI offering from Microsoft. In the BI offering, we work at 3 levels. If you're going to do one thing in business intelligence, it has to be about trusting your data. Is your data accurate? Is it complete? Is it integrated? Is it consistent? Can your users find the data that they need to make better decisions? And when they find data, do they find the right amount or do they find too much data? The bottom line of the stack, the sort of root of the Microsoft BI stack, is to enable you first to trust your data. And the tool we use for that is SQL Server 2005. When you think about, the place where the kind of trusted attributes about data, about reliability, about security, about availability, about scalability, all those kind of enterprise and trusted attributes come together with the actual ability to be a data platform, that's SQL. And when we started the Microsoft BI stack about 9, almost 10 years ago, we started in SQL for that reason. And SQL has a lot to offer to the BI stack. Of course, it starts with the relational engine, the ability to store huge amounts of data, high query performance for both transactional and for decision support type queries, the ability to cluster, to scale out, and things like that. All that comes from SQL. But on top of that, we built 3 specific components in SQL that really go a long way to enriching the BI stack. Starts with SQL Server Integration Services, so you can do the ETL tasks that you need, move data from a variety of sources, enrich that data, synthesize new data through the completeness and the integration of multiple data sources, and then in a high-performance way put that back into SQL Server. You don't have to start in SQL Server. In truth, you don't have to end in SQL Server, although we like that. You can read data from pretty much any source, desktop source, enterprise source, line of business source, add value to that data through the ETL stack, put it in a rich way into SQL Server, and then go on and use the rest of the stack. On top of that, we add value with SQL Server Analysis Services, or AS as some people call it. That allows you to put complex calculations into the system in a very complete and consistent way, including things like key performance indicators, so that you add value to that data, you enrich that data with that kind of shared business logic, and you give people a kind of natural hierarchical navigation of data that is more intuitive to business users than regular kind of set logic that would be traditional in a relational database engine. And then finally, inside of the SQL Server part of the BI stack, we have SQL Server Reporting Services, and that really is about letting people get at the data, publish data, making things easily accessible to the largest number of users. So we started there. We wanted to build that kind of base of trust of the data. And really, if you only did one thing, you've actually done a lot. Most companies haven't even reached that level of trusting their corporate data. The next layer, if you do 2 things, if you've already done the work and you trust your data, the next thing is, do you provide tools and access to data that really lets you trust the insights that your employees get? So you've got this nice trusted set of data, you've got this nice clean, consistent, integrated, updated SQL Server, you've got a data warehouse, maybe you have an ODS, you like the cubes, it's all there. Do the tools that your users have lend to their making better decisions? As employees, as individuals, does it enrich their jobs? Are the tools familiar? Do they allow users to find the right data? Again, not find too much data. To really draw conclusions from the data as opposed to just making pretty pictures. The tool that most business users already know, trust, and understand for exploring and understanding data is Microsoft Excel. And in Office 2007, the Office team has made a huge investment in hooking up Excel and the cubes that come from the trusted data platform, SQL Server. And so they really worked hard to make that a much more intuitive and natural process. But it doesn't end just with Excel, the tool. They really enriched the Excel, the kind of classic Excel tool, but they also built a version of Excel called Excel Services that works with SharePoint. And so you have the ability to take some of the analyses and insights that your employees gain and publish them out to a really wide range of employees, but to know that it's centralized, it's consistent, and it remains trusted. There's another component in SharePoint that's interesting to talk about, and it's the Business Data Catalog, which really lets you make it easy for your employees to find the data that you've already put away in that trusted platform in SQL inside your data warehouse. So if you've done these 2 steps, you've really gone from the chaos of having a lot of line of business systems in a non-integrated way. You've brought some of that data into an integrated and consistent view of the company that you trust. You've given some tools to your employees so you trust that they're making good insights. The next step is to really trust the decisions that your company makes, to really take this to another level. First layer, second layer together gives you employees and employee productivity, employees making better decisions. But how do you bring that up to a corporate level? And that's what we're doing new in my team. And our team is called the Performance Point team. And we're building a product called Performance Point Server 2007. It'll be out in calendar year 2007. And we're really focusing on the corporate aspects of decision making. And we're really taking the BI stack, the trusted data and trusted insight parts of the stack, SQL Server and Office, and extending it into corporate decision making. In a sense, we're trying to improve on BI in 3 different ways. And the first way is by making it more complete. And there's 2 parts of making BI more complete. One is that you get more subject areas. So typically when an employee looks at the trusted data you built in your data warehouse, they're typically going after a certain problem. So maybe you've got, say, a store manager who's trying to say, do I have better days than worse days? Do I have times of the week, times of the day that, my sales are better, and I want to do something about that. I want to figure out how to improve other parts of the day or other parts of the week. You're looking at sales data and you make one set of decisions. But if you look at sales data and you look at operational data and you look at things like rents and you look at things like the HR costs and things like that, you're going to make a different decision potentially. And in the store where I was looking and saying, well, do I really want to optimize sales in this way or that way? If that's the store in my chain that has the highest rent, maybe the decision is to shut down the store. So this whole idea of looking at a complete spectrum with all the financial data, all the operational data, all the sales and selling data, all the HR data to give a more complete perspective, that's one aspect of making BI more complete. The other aspect is really understanding the entire BI process. And if you go back to kind of the original decisions of BI, the way the kind of we've been talking about for really onward of 20 years at this point, there's really 5 kinds of questions that people ask. What happened? What is happening? Why? What will happen? And what do I want to have happen? And that's a real spectrum from looking way back to what has already happened to looking way forward to what will happen. And we've kind of abstracted that down or condensed that down to monitoring your business, analyzing your business, and planning your business. And whenever you say it in that order, somebody will tell you, well, wait a minute, shouldn't it be planning before monitoring and shouldn't it be monitoring before analysis? And the answer is yes. It's really not a stack. It's a circle. And if you and I started a new company tomorrow, we'd start with a plan. But once we had the plan, we would monitor the plan. And we'd find the things that are going well, and we'd do more of them, and we'd find the things that aren't going so well, and hopefully do less of them. But we'd analyze what those things are. We'd make a modification to the plan. We'd monitor the modification, and we'd just keep going around the cycle. And in truth, companies enter this at different points. Companies that don't have rigorous planning right now, maybe start with monitoring, get into analysis, get into planning from there. But the point is it's a cycle. So when we say that Performance Point will make for more complete BI, we're talking about both the subject completeness of finance and operations and all those other areas, and the activity completeness of monitoring your business, analyzing your business, and planning your business. And there's components of Performance Point that do all 3 of those things. If you have any experience with the Business Scorecard Manager 2005, its next generation is the monitoring component of Performance Point. If you have any experience with ProClarity, its next generation is the analysis component of Performance Point Server. And for the planning part, we have a whole new component coming that had been called BizSharp, which is a term some people have heard, and that will emerge as the planning component. And as I said, this all comes out in 2007 and will be an integrated tool completely built on top of SQL Server and Office, particularly Excel and SharePoint. So that's one aspect, more completeness. The next aspect that we want to focus on is making the BI process more corporate. And that's kind of interesting because if you think about it, when you went through step 1, trusting your data, step 2, trusting your employees' insights, you really got to personalize BI. Now you want to think about how do we bring all those personal insights into the corporate realm. And there's really 2 things going on there. One is, are the BI activities in your company going on within a corporate process? Do they follow corporate rules? Do they calculate values the same way that we want them calculated? So that when a bunch of people are talking about market share, for instance, they're all calculating market share the same way, the way we like to do it in our company. So Performance Point allows the corporation to build a model of its business, to really say, this is how we calculate share, these are the important KPIs, this is how we calculate them. They'll be multidimensional, so KPIs will vary, their values and their goals will vary as you go down the org tree, as you look at products, you look at warehouses or subsidiaries or things like that. But it's a corporate definition of BI. And the nice thing you get out of that is you really allow the individual decision makers to jump into that process with the model already established. So you don't have a bunch of users running off building spreadsheets and then getting into the conference room with a whole bunch of sort of differing spreadsheets. We start with a corporate definition of the way decision making is supported, the way some of our calculations are made, the data that flows into those, and then we actually implement a corporate process. So for instance, if you have say a lot of salespeople doing sales forecasting, and they have to get approvals from office manager, regional manager, district manager, etc., well then we actually support that process. We implement that process. The other aspect of making decisions more corporate is actually a little more technical and financial, and that is that we provide users with a complete view of the data after allocation, consolidation, and elimination. So again, to go back to my previous example, if I had a store and I was making decisions based on the data I have about my store, I'm not really seeing the impact of, say, regional inventory, local transportation, national advertising, and things like that. So in the back end of Performance Point, we do all those kind of, financy things that typically they only do off in the finance department. We do them live in the system. So we do consolidation of data from the bottom to the top, allocation of costs and expenses from the top down, and elimination of business transactions between the companies or between parts of the company. And the bottom line in that is you're actually really seeing corporate data at that point. It's not just my store, your store, my product, your product. It's really my store, my product, based on having washed all the way through all the various impacts of the company, both bottoms up and top down. And then the third thing we're trying to do with Performance Point Server is really make BI accountable. And if you think about the history of BI so far, it's actually been kind of a read-only business. Trust your data. We get a good set of cubes and a good set of data warehouses that people really believe in and can go access, and we make it easy to discover. Trust your insights, so we give people tools, and now people sit down and they make decisions. And they say something like, for my business, I should take 3 people off the phone, put them on the sales floor. But so what? What do you do? Well, you actually do that. You actually go talk to 3 human beings, you change their jobs, you change their job descriptions, whatever it is. But if you don't go back and modify the plan, if you don't alter the plan and take a 3 away from here and add 3 to that thing over there, then how do you know a quarter later that it was a good idea? Or a year later? And so by making BI a right-back process, by really getting that loop of monitoring where you are, analyzing and making a decision, and then modifying the plan and actually writing it back, you're not really holding people accountable as well as you possibly could. So by doing this right-back piece of the BI stack, you've really added accountability. Now, when we give somebody a spreadsheet, we can tell them what they've done in the past, the decisions they made, how well they worked out. They can make better decisions going forward. We know who made what decisions. We know what data they looked at. We know what the context of the decision was. We record the whole thing. A month later, a week later, a day later, a quarter later, a year later, whatever it is, we go back and we see, was that really a good decision or a bad decision? And interestingly enough, the flip side of the accountability coin is really the compliance coin. Okay, and I'm not saying a Performance Point Server is an entire compliance solution, but we do know through logging what data individuals saw, what decisions they made, and then later we can match that up to results. So it's a component of your overall compliance strategy for your company. So that's really the whole stack. Starts with SQL Server, focused on trusting your data. Layers on top Office, focuses on really giving your employees the tools to make better insights, and then adds on top Performance Point Server 2007, really taking your BI stack and making it a corporate asset. And that, in its entirety, is really the Microsoft BI stack.